She was living in a rundown motel with $3 to her name. Her husband had destroyed her career, stolen everything she owned, and was now living in their house with her best friend. The eviction notice sat on the stained mattress when her phone rang. A voice said, "Miss Bennett, this is Morrison and Associates. Your grandmother has left you an inheritance." Sophia laughed bitterly. She didn't have a grandmother. She'd been alone since her mother died 7 years ago. But then the wire transfer hit her account. $15,000. Real money. And a letter in elegant handwriting that made her hands shake. "Come home, Sophia. Come claim what was always yours. The suffering ends now." What she discovered in San Francisco would change everything. Her grandmother hadn't just left her money. She'd left her a $950 million empire and the power to destroy everyone who betrayed her. If you love stories about betrayal, revenge, and rising from the ashes, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash the like button if you're ready for this journey. And drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if you're Team Sophia or if you think she should have handled things differently. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear a story about turning pain into power. Now, let's get into how Sophia went from broken to unstoppable. 2 years ago, when everything was perfect, Sophia Bennett was 27 years old when her mother lost her battle with cancer, leaving behind a small life insurance policy of $200,000 and a daughter who suddenly had no family left in the world. Her mother had been a single parent who'd struggled financially her entire life, working double shifts as a nurse to give Sophia opportunities she'd never had. What Sophia didn't know, what her mother had never told her, was that she had a grandmother. Eleanor Catherine Bennett had been erased from family history, a name her mother refused to speak, a ghost from a past too painful to acknowledge. Sophia's mother had believed, until her dying day, that Eleanor had abandoned her when she was just 8 years old, choosing wealth and freedom over her own child. The truth was far more complicated, but Sophia would only learn that years later, when it was almost too late. For 7 long years after her mother's death, Sophia lived believing she was completely alone in the world, building her career as a marketing director in Seattle, dating occasionally but never seriously, still grieving the only family she'd ever known. She threw herself into work, climbed the corporate ladder, and tried to fill the emptiness with achievement. But nothing could replace the hollow ache of having no one to call when life got hard. At 32 years old, Sophia met Derek Marshall at a corporate presentation where he was pitching a luxury development project to her company. He was 42, devastatingly charming, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd built a successful real estate development business from the ground up. He had perfectly styled dark hair with just enough silver at the temples to make him look distinguished, wore custom-tailored suits that whispered money rather than shouted it, and spoke with a kind of authority that made boardrooms go quiet when he entered. After the presentation, he found Sophia in the hallway and asked if she'd have dinner with him to discuss potential marketing partnerships. That dinner turned into a weekend getaway to wine country. The weekend turned into constant text messages, expensive flowers delivered to her office, surprise tickets to shows she'd mentioned wanting to see. Derek pursued her with an intensity that felt like fate, like the universe finally deciding she'd suffered enough loneliness and was sending her exactly what she needed. He listened when she talked about her mother, held her when she cried about feeling untethered without family, and promised her that she'd never be alone again. 8 months after that first dinner, he proposed on a beach at sunset, the waves crashing behind him as he dropped to one knee with a platinum ring that caught the dying light. "You're everything I've ever wanted," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion that seemed so genuine. "Let me spend my life proving you made the right choice trusting me." Sophia, who'd spent 7 years feeling like a ship without an anchor, believed she'd finally found her harbor. 3 months later, Sophia married Derek in a small, elegant ceremony at a boutique hotel overlooking Puget Sound, with Vanessa Cole standing beside her as maid of honor. Vanessa had been Sophia's college roommate, her closest friend for over 12 years, the sister she'd never had by blood but had chosen through countless late-night conversations, share heartbreaks and celebrations. Vanessa was 32 years old, 2 years younger than Sophia, with striking features and an infectious laugh that could light up any room she entered. She'd been there when Sophia's mother died, holding her to the funeral and the dark months that followed. She'd been there for every bad date, every career triumph, every moment of Sophia's adult life that mattered. So when Vanessa stood beside her at the altar, gave a tearful toast about soulmates and destiny, and hugged her so tight she could barely breathe, Sophia felt like her family was finally complete again. After the ceremony, Derek surprised her by announcing he put both their names on the deed to a beautiful craftsman home in a tree-lined Seattle neighborhood. Sophia contributed her mother's entire life insurance policy, $200,000, as a down payment, believing completely in their shared future. "This is ours," Derek had said, pressing a kiss to her forehead as they stood in the empty living room on moving day. "Our house, our life, built together on equal ground." They spent months decorating every room, choosing paint colors together, arguing playfully over furniture styles, hosting dinner parties where Vanessa was always the first guest to arrive and the last to leave. Everything felt perfect, like Sophia had finally outrun the loneliness that had chased her since her mother's death. The first year of marriage was everything Sophia had dreamed of during those lonely years after her mother died. Derek was attentive and affectionate, leaving notes on her pillow when he traveled for work, sending flowers to her office for no reason except that it was Tuesday and he was thinking of her. They took weekend trips to the San Juan Islands, explored new restaurants in Seattle, talked about starting a family in a few years once Derek's development company was more established. Vanessa was a constant presence in their lives, coming over for wine nights when Derek worked late, helping Sophia plan surprise birthday dinners for him, becoming as much a part of their marriage as the furniture they'd chosen together. Sophia's career was thriving too. She'd been promoted to senior marketing director, was managing a team of 12 people, earning praise from executives who noticed her innovative campaigns. For the first time since her mother's death, Sophia felt genuinely happy, like she finally built a stable, loving life she'd always wanted but never thought she'd have. She'd catch herself sometimes, standing in their kitchen while Derek cooked dinner and Vanessa set the table, thinking about how her mother would have loved to see this, would have been so proud that her daughter had created the family and security she'd worked so hard to provide but never quite achieved herself. Those moments felt bittersweet but beautiful. Grief mixed with gratitude, and Sophia believed with absolute certainty that the worst of her life was behind her. She had no idea that the worst was actually just beginning, hiding behind the smile of the man who'd promised to protect her and the best friend who'd promised to always have her back. Around 18 months into the marriage, subtle changes began creeping into Sophia's perfect life, like shadows lengthening at dusk. Derek started working late 4 or 5 nights a week, coming home after she'd already gone to bed, claiming that a major development project was consuming all his time and energy. When she suggested he hire more help or delegate some responsibilities, he snapped at her in a way he never had before, his voice sharp with irritation. "You don't understand business pressure, Sophia. Not everyone gets to leave work at 5:30 and call it a day." He became increasingly critical of small things, the way she loaded the dishwasher, her choice of wine for dinner parties, how much time she spent on the phone with colleagues. "You're so needy," he'd say when she asked if they could have one evening together without his phone constantly buzzing. "Why do you need constant attention like a child?" The affection that had defined their first year together evaporated almost completely. He stopped leaving notes, stopped sending flowers, barely acknowledged her in the mornings. Their intimate life, which had been passionate and frequent, disappeared entirely. When Sophia tried to reconnect physically, Derek would turn away saying he was too exhausted, too stressed, too focused on work to think about anything else. He started taking phone calls in other rooms, his voice dropping to a murmur she couldn't quite hear through closed doors. He'd check his phone obsessively during dinner, his fingers flying across the screen with a small smile that never appeared when he was looking at her. Sophia told herself it was just a phase, that every marriage went through difficult periods, that once his big project was finished they'd reconnect, and everything would go back to how it had been. She pushed down the anxiety that kept her awake at night, the voice in her head that whispered something was deeply wrong. While Derek was becoming distant and critical, Vanessa was undergoing a transformation that seemed to happen overnight. Suddenly, Sophia's best friend, who'd worked in human resources and complained constantly about student loan payments, was showing up to their house wearing Chanel suits, carrying Hermes bags, and driving a leased Mercedes G-Wagon that cost more per month than most people's rent. When Sophia asked about the sudden influx of designer everything, Vanessa laughed and waved her hand dismissively, saying she'd quit her HR job to do high-level consulting work that paid extremely well. Her social media, which had previously been casual photos of brunch and hiking trips, transformed into a carefully curated feed of luxury. Unboxing videos of designer purchases, photos from exotic locations like Santorini and the Maldives, champagne bottles with price tags that made Sophia's eyes water, restaurant meals that cost more than Sophia spent on groceries in a month. Her Instagram handle changed to Vanessa Lux Life, and she rapidly gained followers. 245,000 people watching her live what looked like an impossibly glamorous existence. When people commented asking what she did for work, Vanessa would reply with winky face emojis and vague references to consulting and investments. What disturbed Sophia more than the unexplained wealth was how much time Vanessa started spending at their house, specifically when Derek was home. She'd text Sophia saying she was in the neighborhood and would love to stop by, then end up staying for hours, laughing at Derek's jokes, touching his arm when she talked to him, asking his advice about investment opportunities she was considering. Derek seemed more animated around Vanessa than he'd been around Sophia in months, his eyes lighting up when she walked in, his voice losing the edge of irritation it had whenever Sophia spoke. When Sophia mentioned feeling uncomfortable with how often Vanessa was around, Derek accused her of being jealous and insecure. "She's your best friend, Sophia. Why are you being so paranoid and weird about her success?" Everything shattered on a Tuesday afternoon 6 months before Sophia would receive that life-changing phone call in her motel room. She left work early, around 2 in the afternoon, because a migraine was making it impossible to focus on the presentation she was supposed to be preparing. The house was quiet when she arrived, but Derek's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for a weekday afternoon. She assumed he'd come home for lunch and maybe fallen asleep, something he'd done occasionally when particularly exhausted. Sophia walked through the house calling his name softly, not wanting to startle him if he was napping, heading toward their bedroom to grab migraine medication from the bathroom. That's when she heard it. Sounds that made her blood go cold, that made her feet stop moving on the hardwood floor, that made reality tilt sideways in a way it would never quite straighten again. Voices, movement, the unmistakable sounds of 2 people in her bed. For several seconds, Sophia stood frozen in the hallway, her brain refusing to process what her ears were telling her, constructing elaborate alternative explanations that would make this okay, would make this anything other than what it obviously was. Then she forced her feet forward, pushed open the bedroom door, and saw her husband and her best friend together in the sheets she'd washed just 3 days ago, in the bed where she'd been sleeping alone for months while Derek claimed exhaustion. Vanessa was wearing Sophia's silk robe, the one Derek had given her for their first anniversary. The room smelled like Vanessa's perfume mixed with something else Sophia couldn't name but felt in her gut like a punch. She heard a sound come out of her own throat, something between a scream and a cry, and watched as they both turned toward her. But they didn't panic. They didn't scramble to cover themselves or stammer apologies. They just looked annoyed, like she'd interrupted something important. Derek got dressed with casual indifference, the same way he might after a shower, not like a man caught destroying his marriage in the most devastating way possible. Vanessa sat up, pulled Sophia's robe tighter around herself, and had the audacity to smile, not apologetically, but with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Sophia stood there shaking, her purse falling from her shoulder to the floor with a thud that seemed impossibly loud in the terrible silence. When she finally found her voice, it came out broken and small. "How long?" Derek sighed, running his hand through his hair like she was being tedious. "We didn't want you to find out this way, Sophia. But honestly, does it matter? 18 months, maybe? Since around the time we bought this house. 18 months. Almost their entire marriage. Every dinner where Vanessa had been the perfect third wheel. Every time Derek had claimed to be working late. Every laugh they'd shared that Sophia had interpreted as friendship. It had all been a lie, a performance, a betrayal so complete it made Sophia's knees buckle. She grabbed the doorframe key from falling as Vanessa spoke, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. "Don't be dramatic, sophomore. We're all adults here. These things happen. It's nobody's fault, really." But Derek's next words were worse than Vanessa's dismissive cruelty. "Honestly, Sophia, you become so exhausting. So needy, so clingy, always wanting attention and validation like a child who can't function without constant reassurance. Vanessa understands me in ways you never could. She understands ambition, success, what it takes to build something significant. She doesn't make everything about her feelings all the time." Sophia felt something break inside her chest, something that had been cracked before, but was now shattering completely. She thought about every time she'd asked for a date night and been told she was being needy. Every time she'd wanted affection and been told she was too demanding. He'd been rewriting their marriage in his head, casting her as a villain in a story where he was a victim of her impossible emotional requirements. The systematic destruction of Sophia's life began that same week with efficiency that suggested careful planning. Derek filed for divorce 3 days after she discovered the affair, and when Sophia met with a lawyer to discuss her options, she learned the devastating truth about documents she'd signed throughout their marriage. The prenuptial agreement she'd barely glanced at, trusting Derek when he said it was just a formality that would never matter, gave her absolutely nothing in the divorce. The beautiful house they'd bought together, the one she contributed $200,000 toward, was held in a marital trust that Derek had somehow gotten her to sign over complete control of during their first year together. She remembered signing papers he brought home from his lawyer, remembered him saying it was just paperwork to protect their assets from liability in his business, remembered trusting him completely. The joint bank accounts where their money had been pooled were empty. Derek had systematically transferred everything to accounts in only his name over the previous 3 months, leaving her with nothing. Even worse, when Sophia checked her investment accounts, the ones she'd set up with part of her mother's life insurance money and had been growing steadily, Derek's name had been added at some point, and the accounts were now drained. He'd taken not just their shared money, but a last remaining piece of her mother's legacy, the money that was supposed to be Sophia's safety net, her security, her inheritance from the woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion trying to provide for her daughter's future. When Sophia confronted Derek about the theft, he looked at her with cold eyes and said simply, "It's not theft when you sign the documents giving me access. You should have read what you were signing, instead of being so naive and trusting." The cruelty in his voice, the complete absence of guilt or remorse, made Sophia realize she'd never actually known this man at all. The Derek who'd promised to protect her, who'd held her when she cried about her mother, had been a performance. This Derek, the one who could take everything from her and feel nothing, was a real person who'd been hiding behind a mask of charm and false devotion. The destruction didn't stop with the divorce. 2 weeks after Sophia discovered the affair, Vanessa made a series of phone calls to Sophia's employer that would complete her annihilation. Vanessa called Sophia's supervisor and HR department claiming that Sophia had been behaving erratically for months, making threats against her, showing signs of instability and mental health crisis. She provided evidence, text messages that Sophia immediately recognized as fabricated, edited conversations that made her sound unhinged and dangerous, accusations of theft of company resources, and harassment of employees. Vanessa claimed Sophia had been obsessively jealous of her success, had been stalking her social media, had made threatening comments about destroying her reputation. The HR investigation lasted only 10 days before Sophia was called into a meeting and informed her employment was terminated immediately. She was escorted out of the building by security, while her former colleagues watched, their faces a mixture of pity and suspicion. The job she'd worked so hard to build, the career she'd been so proud of, the reputation she'd spent years establishing, gone in a single afternoon because of lies told by someone she considered family. Every company she applied to afterward received terrible references or no references at all. She was blacklisted unemployable, her professional reputation destroyed as thoroughly as her personal life. Her friends, the people she thought cared about her, believed Vanessa's version of events. After all, Vanessa was successful, confident, thriving, while Sophia was clearly falling apart. Phone calls went unreturned. Invitations stopped coming. People crossed the street to avoid her. Meanwhile, social media showed Derek and Vanessa living Sophia's life without her, hosting parties in her house, posing in her bedroom, Vanessa wearing jewelry Sophia recognized as pieces Derek had given her during their marriage. One photo caption made Sophia physically sick. "When you finally find your soulmate, bless, living my best life." Within 3 months of discovering the affair, Sophia had lost everything. She had $3,000 in a personal account Derek hadn't known about, no job, no prospects, no family, no friends, and no place to live. She moved into the Sunset Motel, a weekly rate place on Highway 99, where the carpet was stained, the walls were paper-thin, and the smell of mildew never quite went away. She ate inexpensive meals and skipped eating to stretch her money. She walked everywhere because she'd sold her car to make rent. She applied to 50 jobs and got 0 responses. She lay awake at night in that terrible room listening to arguments through walls and thought about how Derek had been right. She was nothing. She would never matter again. She would never rise from this. The only thing that stopped her from giving up completely was a stubborn voice in the back of her mind that sounded like her mother. "You're stronger than this. You're stronger than them. Don't give them the satisfaction." But Sophia didn't feel strong. She felt demolished, erased, convinced she would fade away in that motel room, having never mattered to anyone at all. Present day, 6 months in the motel. 6 months had passed since Sophia moved into that terrible motel room, and every day had been a battle just to survive. She'd sold everything of value, her laptop, her jewelry, even the designer handbag Derek had given her for their first anniversary that she'd kept out of spite. She'd applied to over 100 jobs and received 0 callbacks, her blacklisted reputation spreading through Seattle's professional networks like poison. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under her door while she was out walking to save bus fare, giving her 72 hours to vacate or be forcibly removed. Sophia sat on the edge of the stained mattress, staring at that notice, feeling the last thread of hope finally snap. She had $200 left to her name, hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days, and was wearing the same jeans she'd been wearing for a week because laundry cost money she didn't have. The fluorescent light overhead flickered with a buzzing sound that had become the soundtrack to her descent into absolute nothingness. She was 34 years old, had a master's degree in marketing, had once managed a team of 12 people and earned 6 figures, and now she couldn't afford a $5 meal without doing mental calculations about whether she'd be able to eat tomorrow. Her phone rang. The screen cracked from when she dropped it weeks ago and couldn't afford to fix it, showing an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Creditors had been calling constantly, and she learned there was no point in explaining she had nothing left to give them. But something made her swipe to accept the call, maybe just a desperate hope that it might be a job callback, even though she'd stopped expecting those months ago. A professional male voice spoke. "Ms. Bennett, this is Morrison & Associates, estate attorneys in San Francisco. We've been trying to reach you regarding an urgent matter concerning the estate of Eleanor Catherine Bennett." Sophia's first thought was that this was a scam, one of those elaborate schemes where they pretend you've inherited money and then somehow take the little you have left. "I don't know anyone by that name," she said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "I think you have the wrong person." But the voice continued with patient insistence. "Eleanor Catherine Bennett was your grandmother, Miss Bennett. She passed away 9 months ago, and you are the sole beneficiary of her estate. This is a legitimate matter, I assure you. A certified letter is being delivered to your current address within the hour with all relevant documentation." Sophia ended the call thinking it was absolutely impossible because she didn't have a grandmother. Her mother had been raised believing her own mother had abandoned her, and there had never been any mention of other family. But exactly 53 minutes later, there was a knock on her motel room door, and a courier handed her a thick envelope with Morrison & Associates printed in raised gold lettering on expensive cream paper. Inside was a legal document on official letterhead notifying her of an inheritance, a business-class ticket for Amtrak from Seattle to San Francisco departing in 2 days, and a letter explaining that $15,000 had been wired to her bank account for immediate expenses related to travel and accommodations. Sophia's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the papers. She grabbed her phone, opened her banking app expecting to see the same depressing balance of $187.42, and instead saw $15,187 $187.42. The money was real, actually real, sitting in her account like a miracle she didn't understand and couldn't quite believe. At the bottom of the envelope was a smaller envelope, handwritten in elegant script with just her name, Sophia. She opened it with trembling fingers and pulled out a single sheet of cream stationery with handwriting that looked like it belonged in a museum, careful and beautiful. The letter was dated 1 week before the sender's death, and it read, "Dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, I am gone, but you are not alone. You never were. I watched you your entire life from a distance I couldn't cross, but I never stopped loving you. Come to Sonoma Valley. Come see what I built for you. Come claim what was always yours. The suffering ends now. With all my love, Eleanor Catherine Bennett, your grandmother." Sophia read the letter 3 times before the tears came, great shaking sobs that felt like they were being pulled from somewhere deep in her chest, because the word grandmother hit something in her she thought was completely dead. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. Someone had been watching. Someone had cared. Someone had left her something that might save her from disappearing entirely. The next morning, Sophia used $750 of the wire transfer to walk into a boutique clothing store for the first time in months. She bought a simple black dress that actually fit properly, a blazer that didn't come from a thrift store, and real leather shoes that made her feel like a person who mattered instead of someone the world had decided to erase. The saleswoman had looked at her with initial skepticism that transformed into professional courtesy when Sophia's card went through, and that small shift in how she was treated made Sophia realize how invisible she'd become, how poverty had turned her into someone people looked through rather than at. Sophia got her hair trimmed and styled at a salon, the first time in 6 months, watching the mirror as the stylist worked and thinking about how different she looked now compared to the woman who'd stood at that altar believing she'd found forever. That woman had been naive, trusting, willing to sign documents without reading them because she believed love meant never having to protect yourself from the person who promised to protect you. This woman, the one looking back from the mirror with harder eyes and sharper edges, would never make that mistake again. She checked out of the Sunset Motel that afternoon, leaving behind everything that terrible place represented. The manager barely looked up when she turned her key, just grunted and went back to watching television, completely unaware that the broken woman who'd been living in room 14 for 6 months was about to discover she'd inherited a fortune. The Amtrak station was crowded with travelers, families and business people and college students, all of them moving through the world with the confidence of people who had places to go and people waiting for them. Sophia boarded the train to San Francisco with one small suitcase containing everything she owned, the letter from Eleanor folded in her pocket, and a feeling she barely recognized anymore: hope. The journey would take 3 days with stops and connections, 3 days for her to process the impossible reality that somewhere in California, a grandmother she'd never known had been watching her suffer, and had left her something that might change everything. She spent those days reading Eleanor's letter over and over, studying every word, trying to understand what it meant that she'd had family all this time and never known. Sophia used some of the money to buy real meals in the dining car, and the simple act of eating food that hadn't come from a convenience store or a vending machine made her want to cry. She watched the landscape change outside her window, mountains and forests and desert and farmland, and felt like she was watching her old life disappear behind her with every mile. Other passengers tried to make small talk sometimes, asking where she was headed and why. And Sophia gave vague answers, because how could she explain that she was traveling to meet the legacy of a grandmother she'd never known, to claim an inheritance she didn't understand, to maybe salvage something from the wreckage of a life that had been systematically destroyed by the 2 people she trusted most? When the train finally pulled into San Francisco station, Sophia felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She took a taxi to the address printed on Morrison and Associates letterhead, a gleaming high-rise in the financial district with marble floors and a lobby that smelled like money and power. The receptionist called up to announce her arrival, and within minutes Sophia was being escorted to a corner office on the 47th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Richard Morrison was a distinguished man in his mid-60s with kind eyes and an expensive suit, and he stood when she entered, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "Miss Bennett," he said, and Sophia realized he was using her maiden name, the name she reclaimed after the divorce. "Thank you for coming." I know this must be incredibly confusing and overwhelming. Please, sit down. We have a great deal to discuss. He gestured to a leather chair across from his massive mahogany desk, and Sophia sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. Morrison opened a leather portfolio and slid several documents across the desk toward Sophia, his expression serious but not unkind. Miss Bennett, your grandmother Eleanor Catherine Bennett passed away 9 months ago. She died peacefully in her sleep at her estate in Sonoma Valley, surrounded by people who loved her very much. She left very specific instructions regarding her estate, and those instructions all centered on you. He paused, seeming to gauge a reaction before continuing. You are the sole beneficiary of everything she built over the past 60 years. The Bennett Corporation, which she founded and grew into one of the most successful boutique hotel and property management companies on the West Coast, is now yours. The corporation is currently valued at approximately $950 million. Sophia laughed, actually laughed, because the number was so absurd she couldn't process it as reality. $950 million. It had to be a mistake, a scam, an elaborate joke. This isn't possible, she said, shaking her head. This is insane. I didn't even know I had a grandmother until 2 days ago. This has to be wrong. Morrison's expression didn't change. He simply pulled out more documents, birth certificates, family trees, documentation that had been legally verified, proof of lineage that couldn't be disputed. I understand your skepticism, he said gently, but I assure you this is entirely legitimate. Your grandmother watched your entire life from a distance. She knew everything about you, your career, your marriage, your divorce. She knew you were struggling. He paused significantly. She had private investigators documenting your life for years, and she left very specific instructions about when you should receive this inheritance. Only after you'd experienced real loss and had to fight to survive. Sophia felt cold wash through her entire body. She knew I'd lost everything, and she just watched. Morrison nodded slowly, his expression sympathetic but firm. She had private investigators documenting your life for years, not to invade your privacy, but to understand who you were becoming. Eleanor believed very strongly that inheriting wealth without first understanding hardship would destroy, rather than empower you. She'd seen it happen. People who inherited fortunes without ever struggling became weak, unable to protect themselves when life turned difficult. She didn't want that for you. She died 3 months after your divorce was finalized, knowing you were facing the greatest challenge of your life, but trusting that you would survive it and emerge stronger. He pulled out a thick folder and set it in front of Sophia with careful reverence. These are letters your grandmother wrote to you over the past 15 years. 347 letters. To be exact, she wrote them but never sent them, keeping them until this moment when you would finally read them and understand. Sophia's hands shook as she opened the folder and saw page after page of that same elegant handwriting from the letter that had brought her here. The dates went back years. Letters written when Sophia was in college, when she started her career, when her mother died, when she met Derek, when she got married, even one written after she discovered the affair. Eleanor had been watching everything, documenting her thoughts and feelings in letters that would only be read after her death. Sophia pulled out a letter dated just weeks before Eleanor died, her vision blurring with tears as she began to read the words that would change everything she understood about her suffering. The letter read, "My dear Sophia, if you're reading this, you've lost everything. Your marriage has betrayed you. Your friend has destroyed you. Your career is gone. You're struggling to survive, wondering if you'll ever matter again. I know because I've been watching your life for years. I know because I care more than you can possibly understand. You're wondering why I didn't help, why I let you suffer when I could have intervened. Here's the truth, my darling girl. I inherited wealth when I was 22 years old. My father died and left me everything, and I never struggled, never fought, never had to become strong. When your grandfather turned his violence on me, I was helpless. I had money but no spine. I ran, but I couldn't protect my daughter because I never had to protect myself. I lost her because I was weak despite my wealth. I didn't want that for you. I wanted you to know what it meant to have nothing before you had everything, because only someone who's been powerless can be trusted with power. The world will tell you that you deserve your pain, that you weren't smart enough or strong enough. Don't listen. You survive because you are strong enough. You carry my blood, and we don't break. We bend until we learn, and then we rise. Take what I built. Use it as a weapon. Build yourself into someone who can never be stripped of everything again. Show them all what we're made of. With all my love, Eleanor. Sophia couldn't speak through her tears, couldn't do anything but hold the letter and sob, because every word felt like it had been written specifically for this moment, for this pain, for this exact devastation. Morrison gave her time to compose herself, offering tissues and waiting patiently until she could breathe again. When Sophia finally looked up, Morrison pulled out 3 additional boxes and set them on the desk with deliberate care. These contain everything else your grandmother wanted you to have, he explained quietly. Box 1 is financial records documenting how Derek Marshall manipulated your finances. Your grandmother's investigators were extremely thorough. They documented every document he had you sign, every transfer he made, every way he systematically separated you from your assets. This evidence could be used to pursue legal action if you choose. He opened the box to reveal folders meticulously organized with dates and dollar amounts, a complete paper trail of Derek's theft. Box 2 contained surveillance documentation of Derek and Vanessa Cole, 18 months of evidence, photographs, financial records showing the money Derek spent on her, credit card statements, wire transfers, everything. Your grandmother wanted you to know the truth, all of it, with evidence that couldn't be disputed. Sophia stared at the boxes, feeling numb and overwhelmed. Eleanor had known everything, had documented everything, had watched her granddaughter's life fall apart, and collected evidence like she was building a legal case for a trial that would happen after her death. Box 3, Morrison continued, his voice growing harder, contains documentation that Vanessa falsified evidence to have you fired. Your grandmother's team recovered deleted emails, found the original text messages before Vanessa edited them, and documented her coordination with Derek in destroying your career. This evidence could clear your name and potentially result in serious legal consequences for Ms. Cole. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Your grandmother didn't just leave you money, Ms. Bennett. She left you power. The power to reclaim everything that was taken from you. The power to hold people accountable. And most importantly, the power to ensure nothing like this can ever happen to you again. Morrison pulled out one final item, a leather-bound book that looked like a journal, and placed it gently in front of Sophia. This is your grandmother's personal history. She wanted you to understand who she was and why she built what she built. He opened to the first page where a photograph was mounted. Eleanor at maybe 19 or 20, beautiful and smiling, with eyes that looked hauntingly like Sophia's own. Morrison's voice was gentle as he explained the tragedy that had shaped everything. Eleanor married young to a man named Charles Bennett, your grandfather. He was wealthy, charming, from a prominent family. She thought she found security in love. But Charles was dangerous in ways that didn't show until after the wedding. He controlled her, hurt her, systematically destroyed her confidence while presenting a perfect image to the outside world. They had one daughter together, your mother, Margaret. Eleanor tried to stay for her daughter's sake, but when Charles broke Eleanor's arm and told your mother that Mommy had been bad and deserved punishment, Eleanor knew she had to leave. She tried to take Margaret with her. Morrison's expression grew heavy with old sorrow. But Charles had money, connections, the best lawyers. This was the 1960s, and courts didn't believe women about what happened behind closed doors. Charles got full custody and told Margaret that her mother had abandoned them, that Eleanor never loved her, that she'd run off with another man. Your mother was 8 years old. She grew up believing her mother was selfish and cruel, believing the lies Charles told. Sophia felt her throat close up completely. My mother hated her own mother because of lies? Morrison nodded slowly. Eleanor tried for years to reconnect. She sent letters that were returned unopened. She sent money that was sent back. She tried to call, tried to visit, but Margaret refused all contact. Even when your mother was dying cancer 7 years ago, Eleanor reached out one final time, begging to say goodbye, to explain the truth. Margaret refused. She died believing her mother had abandoned her, and Eleanor died knowing her daughter had hated her until the very end. The tragedy of it hit Sophia like a physical blow, understanding suddenly why her mother had never mentioned Eleanor, why that whole part of their family history had been erased. Her mother had died carrying pain that wasn't even based on truth, and Eleanor had spent 60 years building an empire while grieving a daughter she couldn't reach and a granddaughter she could only watch from a painful distance. 9 months later, the transformed Sophia, Morrison wasn't finished with his revelations. He pressed a button on his desk phone and spoke quietly. "Grace Henry, she's ready to meet you now." Within moments, the office door opened to admit two people who would become the foundation of Sophia's new life. The first was a woman in her late 40s, elegant and sharp-eyed, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of both success and practicality. Her presence filled the room with quiet authority, the kind that came from years of wielding real power and knowing exactly how to use it. "Sophia Bennett," Morrison said with obvious warmth. "This is Grace Mitchell. She was your grandmother's business manager and chief operating officer for the past 20 years. She's been running the Bennett Corporation since Eleanor's passing, waiting for you to arrive and take your rightful place." Grace extended her hand, and when Sophia shook it, Grace's grip was firm and warm, communicating strength and welcome in equal measure. "Your grandmother talked about you constantly," Grace said, her voice rich and steady, carrying the weight of genuine emotion. "She was so proud of you, even from a distance. She'd read the investigators' reports, and tell me about your marketing campaigns, your promotions, the way you led your team. And she was confident that when you finally understood your own strength, when you finally stopped apologizing for existing, you'd be absolutely unstoppable." Morrison gestured to the second person, a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes, silver hair, and the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime in service but had never lost his dignity. "This is Henry Carter, the estate manager and your grandmother's closest confidant for the past 25 years. Henry's smile was gentle and genuine as he shook Sophia's hand. "Welcome home, Miss Bennett. We've been waiting for you for a very long time." Sophia looked between Grace and Henry, feeling overwhelmed by their obvious warmth and the weight of their expectations. "Why would you wait for me?" she asked, her voice smaller than she intended. "You don't even know me. For all you know, I could be completely incompetent, someone who'll destroy everything my grandmother built." Grace and Henry exchanged a glance, and something unspoken passed between them before Grace spoke, her expression softening with understanding. "We know exactly who you are, Sophia. We've been reading the investigator reports for years, watching you build a career from nothing, watching you survive betrayal that would have broken most people. But more than that, we know what Eleanor did for us, and we promised her we'd do the same for you." Grace moved to sit on the edge of Morrison's desk, her posture becoming less formal, more intimate. 20 years ago, I came to Eleanor with absolutely nothing. I was escaping a marriage that had nearly ended my life, running from a man who'd systematically destroyed every aspect of my identity over 8 years. I had no job, no money, no references because I hadn't worked outside the home since the wedding. I had bruises I was covering with makeup and a restraining order that felt like paper against his rage. Eleanor gave me a job cleaning rooms at one of her hotels. Minimum wage, overnight shifts, the kind of work nobody else wanted. But she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Grace's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Within 6 months, she promoted me to front desk. Within a year, I was assistant manager. Within 3 years, I was managing the entire property. She didn't just give me a job. She taught me business, finance, negotiation, everything she knew. She made me take online classes, pay for my MBA, pushed me to be better than I thought I could be. Within 10 years, I was her COO, managing a $950 million empire. She took someone the world had thrown away and proved that person had never been worthless at all, just trapped by circumstances that didn't reflect her value. Henry cleared his throat, adding his own story with quiet dignity. My situation was different but equally desperate. 15 years ago, my elderly mother was thrown out of her home by my brother, who wanted to sell the property and keep the money for himself. She had nowhere to go, no resources, and I was working 3 jobs just to keep my own family afloat. I couldn't afford to take her in, couldn't give her what she needed, and the guilt was destroying me. I applied for the estate manager position at Eleanor's property thinking I had no chance. I had experience in hospitality, but nothing at this level. Eleanor interviewed me for 3 hours, and at the end she said something I'll never forget. "I'm not hiring you because of your resume. I'm hiring you because you're someone who understands that family matters more than money, and that's the kind of person I want managing my home." She hired me, gave my mother a cottage on the estate property, and paid for her care until she passed peacefully 5 years later. Eleanor didn't have to do any of that. She did it because she believed people should be powerful enough to protect the ones they love. He looked at Sophia with eyes that held both compassion and determination. "We're not just employees, Sophia. We're family by choice, family by Eleanor's design. She saved our lives in ways that went far beyond money or jobs. She gave us back our dignity, our power, our belief that we mattered. We promised her that when you finally arrived, when you finally understood what she'd built and why, we'd help you become everything she knew you could be. We're going to teach you the business, introduce you to the networks, show you how to use the power she's given you, and we're going to help you reclaim everything that was taken from you, if that's what you choose to do." The weight of their stories, the depth of their loyalty to a woman Sophia had never met, made tears stream down her face again. But these weren't tears of grief or pain. These were tears of recognition, of understanding that she wasn't alone, that she'd been given not just wealth, but a family who understood exactly what it meant to rise from nothing. The next 9 months became an intensive education, unlike anything Sophia had experienced in her entire academic and professional career. Grace transformed one of the estate's libraries into a war room, covering walls with charts showing every Bennett Corporation property, financial statements detailing revenue streams and investment portfolios, maps highlighting strategic markets and expansion opportunities. Sophia moved into the Bennett estate in Sonoma Valley, a sprawling 200-acre property that took her breath away every single morning when she woke up. The main house was a stone mansion with ivy-covered walls, floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded rooms with golden California light, and a sense of permanence that felt like the opposite of everything she'd lost. Her bedroom suite was larger than the entire motel room had been, with a 4-poster bed, a sitting area overlooking the vineyards, and a walk-in closet that Grace had filled with clothes in her exact size. There had been a note on the dresser that first night, written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, clearly prepared before her death. "Welcome home, my darling girl. Rest now. Tomorrow, we begin building your empire." Grace's business education was relentless and thorough. Your grandmother built this empire on 3 core principles. Grace explained during their first strategy session, her laser pointer highlighting key data on the projection screen. First, own things people need during moments of transition. Our hotels aren't vacation destinations. They're sanctuaries for women starting over, women fleeing bad situations, women rebuilding after divorce, women traveling alone for business and needing to feel safe. We charge luxury prices because we provide something invaluable: security, discretion, and resources. Second principle: never attach your name to anything you can't control completely. The Bennett Corporation owns every property outright. No partners who can betray you, no investors who can outvote you, no one who can take away what's yours. Grace continued, her passion for the business evident in every word. Third principle: always know more about your adversaries than they know about you. Your grandmother was obsessive about information. She maintained files on competitors, on politicians who might affect her business, on anyone who'd ever threatened someone she cared about. Knowledge is power, and she made sure she always had more of it than anyone else. Over the following months, Sophia absorbed everything like she was starving for knowledge. She learned that the Bennett Corporation's 38 properties weren't just hotels. They were strategic acquisitions in markets with high divorce rates, near courthouses where women filed restraining orders, in business districts where women were climbing corporate ladders and needed safe places to stay. She learned about commercial real estate valuation, about investment portfolios balanced between aggressive growth stocks and conservative bonds, about the network of bankers, lawyers, and accountants Eleanor had cultivated over decades. Henry taught her the human side of the empire, taking her to visit properties and introducing her to staff members who shared their stories. Every property employs women who need second chances, Henry explained as they toured the Seattle location. Former domestic violence survivors, women rebuilding after divorce, mothers who age out of other opportunities. Your grandmother believed in building an army of people who'd been dismissed by society and given a chance to prove their worth. These women are loyal beyond measure because they know what it means to be given dignity when the world tried to strip it away. Sophia met dozens of employees, managers who'd started as housekeepers, accountants who'd fled abusive marriages with nothing, executive chefs who'd rebuilt careers after being blacklisted elsewhere. Each story reinforced what Grace and Henry had told her. Eleanor hadn't just built a business. She'd built a movement, a network of women who'd survived and thrived and now helped others do the same. The physical transformation happened naturally alongside the business education. Sophia stopped eating from grief and started eating with purpose, nourishing a body that was being rebuilt for strength rather than just survival. She walked the estate grounds every morning as the sun rose over the vineyards, feeling her body remember what it meant to be powerful. She worked with personal trainer Grace recommended, a woman who'd been a professional athlete before injury ended her career, and Eleanor had hired her to manage the estate's fitness facilities. The workouts were brutal but transformative, building not just muscle, but the kind of confidence that came from knowing your body could be trusted to carry you through anything. Grace took Sophia shopping, not just for clothes, but for armor, power suits that commanded attention in boardrooms, elegant dresses that turned heads at charity galas, casual wear that still communicated wealth and success. Your grandmother always said that presentation is part of power, Grace explained as they worked with a personal stylist. Not because you need to impress anyone, but because the world judges women on appearance whether we like it or not. Looking like you belong in rooms where decisions are made means people assume you belong there. An assumption is halfway to acceptance. But the real transformation was internal, forged in those quiet moments when Sophia read her grandmother's letters late at night. Each letter offered wisdom earned through pain and tested by time, lessons Eleanor had learned over 60 years of building power from devastation. One letter in particular became Sophia's touchstone, read so many times she'd memorized every word. They will tell you that anger makes you ugly, that bitterness poisons you, that you should forgive and forget and move on. Don't believe them. Anger, properly channeled, is the fuel that powers every great change. Let yourself be angry. Let yourself want revenge. Then use that fire to build something so magnificent that revenge becomes irrelevant because you transcended everyone who tried to break you. 3 months into her education, Grace walked into the morning strategy session with particular expression, satisfaction mixed with something sharp and dangerous. She dropped a thick file folder on the table in front of Sophia with deliberate emphasis. "I think you're ready for this," Grace said simply. Sophia opened the folder and felt her heart begin to race. Inside was everything about Derek Marshall's current financial situation, compiled with the same meticulous detail Eleanor's investigators had used on everything else. The numbers told a story of complete financial collapse in progress. Derek owed $3.7 million across various lenders, with most debts coming due within the next 18 months. He was borrowing from one lender to pay another, a classic debt spiral that could only end in bankruptcy or foreclosure. His development company was failing, hemorrhaging money on projects that couldn't find buyers. The house, Sophia's house, the one she contributed $200,000 toward, was mortgaged for $890,000 despite being worth only $650,000 in current market conditions. But the most damaging information was in the second section, a complete accounting of money Derek had spent on Vanessa Cole over 18 months. $380,000 documented in credit card statements, wire transfers, and receipts. Designer clothing totaling over $150,000. A leased Mercedes G-Wagon at $1,800 per month. Jewelry from Cartier and Tiffany totaling $75,000. Exotic vacations to Maldives, Santorini, Paris, and Dubai. Restaurant meals costing $500 to $1,000 multiple times weekly. Grace pulled up Vanessa's Instagram on the screen. Vanessa Luxlife with 245,000 followers watching her post designer unboxings and luxury travel, all funded by Derek's borrowed money. She's bleeding him dry, Grace said flatly, and she has no idea he's broke. He can't stop because if she discovers the truth, she'll leave. Grace pulled out another document showing a detailed strategy. We could buy his debts. The Bennett Corporation contacts lenders quietly through shell companies. We offer to purchase the debt at a small premium. The lenders are happy for guaranteed money. We acquire $3.7 million through companies Derek's never heard of. Then we wait for him to default, which he will within 6 months. The moment he does, we have legal right to foreclose on everything. The house, the properties, all of it becomes yours. Sophia stared at the photographs of Derek and Vanessa playing power couple. Vanessa wearing jewelry Sophia recognized. Do it, she said, her voice cold and certain. Buy all the debts, every single one. And Grace, I want to be there when he finds out. I want to see his face when he realizes who owns him. Grace's smile was fierce. Your grandmother would have loved that. Over the next 6 weeks, Grace orchestrated the purchases through a network of shell companies, so complex no one could trace them back to Bennett Corporation. Derek had no idea that the letters offering to buy his loans were all from the same source. No idea that the woman he destroyed was systematically buying the power to destroy him in return. 9 months after discovering her inheritance, the day of reckoning finally arrived. Derek's first major loan payment had come due, and he defaulted. His attorney had been desperately calling the shell companies that owned his debt, begging for extensions, proposing payment plans, growing more frantic by the day. Grace had arranged a meeting at Bennett Corporation headquarters in downtown San Francisco, telling Derek's lawyer only that the principal debt holder is willing to discuss restructuring, but only in person. That morning, Sophia arrived at the office early, wearing a charcoal gray suit that whispered power and wealth. Grace was already in the conference room when Sophia entered, along with 2 attorneys and Henry. How do you want to play this? Grace asked. Sophia walked to the head of the mahogany table and sat down in the position of power. I want to see his face when he realizes. I want him to know it was me. At 9:58, the receptionist called to announce Derek Marshall and his attorney had arrived. The minutes felt like hours until the conference room door opened and Derek walked in. Looking older and stressed, his confidence replaced with barely concealed desperation. He was talking as he entered. I appreciate you taking this meeting. I'm confident we can work out terms that are beneficial for everyone involved. My company has several projects in development that will generate significant revenue, so this is really just a temporary cash flow issue that. Then he looked up and saw Sophia sitting at the head of the table. His words died mid-sentence. His face went through rapid changes. Confusion, shock, disbelief, dawning horror, and finally a sickly understanding that drained all color from his skin. He stopped walking so abruptly his attorney nearly collided with him. Sophia? Derek's voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. What were you doing here? Sophia kept her expression neutral, her voice cold and professional. Hello, Derek. Please, sit down. We have quite a bit to discuss about your financial situation. Derek stood frozen, his brain clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. The last time he'd seen Sophia, she'd been broken, destroyed, living in a motel with nothing. Now she sat in a corner office looking like she belonged there, looking like someone who wielded real power. His attorney cleared his throat nervously. Miss Bennett? I'm sorry, I don't understand. We're here to meet with representatives of the companies holding Mr. Marshall's loans. Are you with their legal team? No, Sophia said simply. I am the principal debt holder. The Bennett Corporation owns every loan Mr. Marshall has defaulted on, all $3.7 million of it. She watched the words hit Derek like physical blows. That's not possible, Derek stammered, gripping the back of a chair for support. You don't have that kind of money. You were living in a motel. You had nothing. Grace spoke up, her voice professionally pleasant, but edged with satisfaction. No mistake, Mr. Marshall. Ms. Bennett is the sole heir to the Bennett Corporation, a $950 million empire built by her grandmother Eleanor Catherine Bennett. We've been quietly purchasing your debts over the past 6 months through shell companies. You're in default, and we have legal right to foreclose on all collateralized assets. Derek's attorney sat down heavily, his face pale. But Derek remained standing, staring at Sophia like she was a ghost. Your grandmother? You told me you didn't have any family. My mother believed she was alone because of lies, Sophia said, her voice steady and cold. Eleanor Bennett spent 60 years building an empire and watching her granddaughter from a distance. She died 9 months ago, 3 months after you destroyed my life, and she left me the power to take back everything you stole. Derek finally sat, his legs giving out. Sophia, listen, whatever you think you're doing, we can work this out. We were married. We built a life together. That has to count for something. We built a life. Sophia's voice went even colder. You built a lie. You manipulated me into signing documents that gave you everything. You stole my mother's life insurance money. You destroyed my career, my reputation, my entire existence. You looked at me the day I found you with Vanessa and told me I was exhausting and needy. You watched me lose everything and felt nothing. Grace slid a folder across the table. Documentation of every dollar you spent on Vanessa Cole over 18 months. $380,000 in designer clothes, jewelry, vacations, luxury apartments. All funded by loans against assets you stole from Sophia. You bankrupted yourself for a gold digger who'll leave you the moment she discovers you're broke. Derek opened the folder with shaking hands, staring at evidence of his own financial suicide. You had me investigated. My grandmother did, Sophia corrected. She knew about the affair 6 months before I discovered it. She documented everything and left it all for me. Grace slid foreclosure papers across the table. Here's what's happening, Derek. You're going to sign these documents transferring all collateralized assets to the Bennett Corporation. That includes a house, my house, the one I paid for with my mother's money, and all your commercial properties. In exchange, we'll consider your debt satisfied. Or you can refuse and we'll pursue foreclosure through courts, make it public and humiliating, destroy whatever reputation you have left, and still take everything. Your choice. Derek's attorney whispered urgently in his ear, clearly advising him that fighting was futile. Derek pushed him away, his eyes desperate. Sophia, please. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But that house, those properties, they're all I have. If you take everything, I'll have nothing. Sophia leaned forward, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of every painful moment. I'm not destroying you, Derek. I'm taking back what was always partially mine. You destroyed yourself when you decided my trust was something to exploit and my worth was something to erase. This isn't revenge. This is justice. This is me ensuring you understand there are consequences for treating people like they're disposable. Derek stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Understanding. He looked at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. You've changed. You're not the woman I married. No, Sophia agreed. That woman was kind and trusting, and loved you despite your flaws. You didn't deserve her. You took everything beautiful about her, and tried to convince her it was weakness. But all you did was teach her to build walls you can never scale again. Derek looked down at the papers, his hands hovering. If I sign this, I have nothing. How am I supposed to start over from zero at 42? The same way I did at 34, Sophia said without sympathy. You figure it out. You survive. Or you don't. Either way, that's not my problem anymore. Derek picked up the pen with shaking hands. Before signing, he looked up one final time, tears in his eyes. I didn't know what I had until I lost it. You were always enough. Sophia, more than enough. I was just too stupid to see it. Now you're someone I could never deserve, even if you'd have me, which you never would. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. He signed the papers with angry strokes, each signature acknowledging everything he'd lost. When he finished, he stood abruptly, his chair crashing backward. I hope this makes you happy. It doesn't, Sophia said honestly, but it makes me clear. You don't have power over me anymore. After Derek left, Sophia sat staring at the signed documents, feeling none of the triumph she'd imagined. Grace touched her shoulder gently. How do you feel? Free, Sophia whispered. Over the following years, Sophia transformed the house into the Bennett Foundation headquarters, expanded the corporation's mission, fell in love with Jackson Hayes, and had twin daughters, Eleanor and Grace. She taught them that strength meant choosing to rise. Derek took a construction job, working his way back from nothing. Vanessa left him immediately. Sophia felt no satisfaction in his struggle, no vindication. She felt nothing about him at all, which was the truest victory. He'd become irrelevant. Standing on the Bennett estate balcony years later with Jackson beside her and their daughter sleeping inside, Sophia thought about the woman in that motel room who believed she'd never matter again. Eleanor had been right about everything. The devastation had been necessary. The suffering had been the forge. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was transformation. Sophia Bennett had risen, not despite the betrayal, but because of it. And nothing could ever pull her down again.